Hello and welcome to today's live. Today we are talking about genetic testing. So I know I haven't done a live for a little while. I've been a little bit poorly. You might hear I'm still a bit sniffly, so apologies for that. And I'm also moving next week. So I know the lives have been very intermittent, but they'll pick back up very shortly, I assure you. So today we're talking about genetic testing, and this is a test that if you've already done, let me know. I'd be interested to know if you've done this already. And if you haven't, I'm going to encourage you to do it. So whether you have a health condition, whatever your symptoms are, it really doesn't matter. This is a test that is worth doing because unlike a lot of other functional testing, which is in essence a snapshot in time. So whenever you get blood work done, or say you do a hormone panel, or an organic acids test, or a stool test, or whatever of these testing that you do, they're all just a snapshot in time. All they're testing is your blood at that second in time that it was taken from your body. They're testing your hormones at exactly that time that you tested the levels at exactly that time. It's a snapshot. And it's helpful, it can give you insight. I'm not saying don't do these things, but they have to be used at the right time, in the right context, to actually be useful or beneficial in any way. The thing with genetic testing is it's not a snapshot in time. It is information that once you have for the rest of your life, because your genes don't change. I mean, they can, but it's very unlikely. You have to get hit by some strange types of radiation from the sun. So it's very uncommon, it's very rare, it doesn't happen regularly. It's usually when you get your genome sequenced, like that's it for the rest of your life. So this is data, this is information that you're going to have about your genetic predispositions and weaknesses for the rest of your life. And I'm not a big fan of the health reports that the companies that provide these things give you. So basically all they're going to do is fearmonger you into saying like, oh, you've got a 7% increased chance of having Alzheimer's and a high chance of having increased cholesterol, and this means you're going to have heart disease and die. It's like, that's not how this is helpful information. That's not useful whatsoever. The way that I find it useful is you can find where you have genetic weaknesses that you can implement therapeutic lifestyle changes to support these genetic weaknesses that you have. So a really good example, and the most common example, so this is the one that's talked about the most popular, let's say, is the MTHFR pathway. So if you have a mutation in your MTHFR pathway, you don't tolerate folic acid very well, and you'll benefit from a folate supplement more than likely. The thing is, this mutation just means that you have down-regulated activity of this pathway. So it doesn't mean that you can't tolerate any folic acid, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you will need folate, but it does mean that when your body is struggling, when your body is in a place where it has an increased stress load, it's probably going to have lower tolerance for folic acid and an increased requirement for folate to bypass any symptoms that you may experience from this genetic weakness. So on a like a healthy, like when you're up and you're fully healthy and you're not sick and everything's going really well, you probably won't need to take any supplements, you probably won't need to do anything, and you'll be completely fine. But say you get a cold, or say you're pushing yourself to run a marathon, like you're putting extra stress on the body, and the body's going to blow out somewhere when it's overly stressed. And understanding your genetics gives you an idea of where you're likely to blow out and what you can do to support your body so that it doesn't blow out. So this is really useful testing, really useful information to know, because life is so variable. It goes up and down all the time. And if you have this information and you understand what it means, you know when you go down what you can do to bring your body back up a little bit, what you can do to support the weaknesses that it has. So how do we go about this? So this is something I suggest everybody does. I use 23&me. You can use any kind of company, let me just cross the road, any kind of company that sequences your genome. That's all you need. You don't need the health reports, you don't need their interpretations, you don't need their diagnostics or anything. All you need is for them to take a DNA sequence. So this is usually some saliva. You'll scrape your cheek on the inside, or you'll spit into a little vial, and they take this genetic material and they sequence your genome. So your DNA is basically this big strand of A's, T's, C's and G's in a different order. And what they do is they basically put all of these in order, and different parts on the genome, so different parts in this big order, are connected to different genetic predispositions for different enzyme pathways and the way that your body does things, and it might be inhibited or upregulated in different ways. So when you get this raw genetic code, it's basically just this big text document of A's, T's, C's and G's, and that's all we need. So we take that and we put it into some software that can help you figure out which A's, T's, C's and G's are different enzyme pathways and whether it means you have mutations there or not. So once you've done this initial test, like say you use 23&me, I believe it's about £80, so not that expensive. As far as testing goes, actually very affordable, considering you're never going to need to do it again in your life. But you can use other companies as well. You can use like Ancestry.com. You can use any of these different companies. You take this code and you paste it in some software. So the one that I really like to use is called Genetic Genie. So you go online and you type Genetic Genie. Just go on Google, type Genetic Genie, and you put your code in there. You basically just upload the file from your emails or from your computer, and it will generate reports for you. And the two that I suggest that you take a look at are the detoxification panel and the methylation panel. And the reason that I like Genetic Genie is it doesn't just tell you what mutations you have, it gives you a short, fairly like if you're kind of into like health and wellness, it's going to give you a fairly understandable, a fairly digestible sort of brief description of what this genetic mutation means, what it's affecting, what it's upregulating, what it's downregulating, what symptoms are connected to it, and a little bit about what you could potentially do to support that pathway. It is a little more complicated than that, I'll be honest, because everybody's so unique and so different, and they've got different genetics, they've got different diets, they've got different epigenetic environment, they've got a different toxin load. It's very difficult to give solid advice or solid information that's universally applicable, because it's such a unique thing. It's completely dependent on your genetics. So the reports can be quite helpful because they give you a much more personalised idea of what's happening. So you take a look at these reports and it will tell you where you might have a problem and what you might be able to do to support it. So today I want to talk about an experience that I had with one of my clients recently, and he has a mutation in something called the SOD2 gene. So SOD is an enzyme, so it's short for, so SOD is sort of like an acronym that stands for superoxide dismutase. You might have heard of that already. This is a fundamental, a key antioxidant enzyme, and it's very, very much responsible for keeping the antioxidant status very, very optimized in your body. And the different SOD enzymes, so you've got SOD1, SOD2, and I think it's SOD4, they skipped 3 for some reason, SOD1, SOD2, SOD4, they do different things. They affect the SOD pathway in different areas of the body. And what was so interesting, I'm gonna sit down over here and give you a nice view of the harbour. What was so interesting in this case is we learned that he had so you can see, lovely. We learned that he had a SOD2 homozygous mutation. So homozygous, so when you're looking at these testing, I'm gonna help you understand what this means. So you get half your genetics from your mum, half your genetics from your dad. And if one of your parents had a mutation, then you're going to have a heterozygous mutation, which means one of your genes is sort of faulty and the other one isn't. But if both of them had it, and then you inherited both of those genes, you have a homozygous mutation, which means both are somewhat ineffective. So in his case, it was homozygous, which means both of them are ineffective in his SOD2. And SOD2, superoxide dismutase, is the version that is present inside the mitochondria, inside the body, so inside your cells. And it was very interesting because two of his most persistent symptoms are brain fog and fatigue. And that makes so much sense when you understand this genetic weakness that he has, because your mitochondria will make your energy and will give you cognition. You've got 10 times more mitochondria in your nervous system tissue, so in your brain and in your eyes and stuff like that, than you do in your muscles. But if your mitochondria are struggling to maintain their antioxidant status, in his case, it makes a lot of sense, because when you've got a homozygous mutation of SOD2, it means that this enzyme is working 80% slower than it should. So he's working on this. A normal person has this much range of this enzyme function, and his is like this big, right? So it's really, really small. And this doesn't mean that we can't get him completely healthy, get him good cognition and back up and full of energy again. It just means we have a smaller window of optimal functionality, which means we have to be more careful. It means he's going to have less tolerance to different types of environmental toxicity, especially environmental toxicity that is dangerous to the mitochondria, because we know his mitochondria struggle to maintain his antioxidant status because he's got so much less of this superoxide dismutase enzyme present. But his other SOD pathways are fine. So this means that his body has plenty of ability to handle free radical and oxidative stress. It just really struggles inside the mitochondria. So this means we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to support the mitochondrial function. We know that his mitochondria are going to be damaged by this, right? This makes a lot of sense. If you can understand that he's got brain fog and he's got fatigue, it means the mitochondria is struggling. And now we can understand a little bit more about why. We can see that he's got a genetic predisposition to have a problem here. So first of all, we're going to encourage any broken mitochondria to break themselves down, because if you watched my the mitochondrial makeover series that I let everybody have access to for free for a day recently in celebration of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia day. So in this cycle, when a mitochondria is damaged, whenever it tries to create energy for you, whenever it tries to synthesize energy out of the food that you eat, instead of it producing energy for you, it's producing reactive oxygen species, which are inflammatory molecules. They're pro-oxidative. And when your mitochondria is damaged, this is happening all the time. So you can get stuck in this vicious cycle where the mitochondria is trying to make energy, but then as it tries to make energy, it produces reactive oxygen species, which damage the mitochondria, which prevent them from being able to make energy and make them produce reactive oxygen species again. So this is a very difficult situation to be in. We're going to get on top of this using fasting and encouraging autophagy. So these broken mitochondria will break down, and then the new ones will be able to regrow, and we have to be mindful that his antioxidant status is going to be slightly lower initially. So we have to provide any extra antioxidants and make sure that we're supporting this SOD pathway as much as we can. And this is the next interesting part. So through this, and this is not something that I knew, I learn a lot of this as I'm working with my clients. So I was doing some more research on this SOD2 pathway, and I learned that it is manganese dependent. So this pathway is more commonly referred to in the scientific community as MN-SOD2, and this is because it requires manganese to function. So say for example you're a healthy person and you've got no mutation issues in this pathway whatsoever, and you're deficient in manganese, that's going to be your rate limiting factor. So even though you don't have a genetic predisposition to have a problem with SOD2, if you're 50% deficient in manganese, the pathway is only going to be working at 50% speed anyway, because it's dependent on manganese. So in this client's case, his maximum rate of this pathway functioning is 20%. But if he's manganese deficient, and say he's deficient to a point where he's only got 10% of the manganese that his body needs to function, even this 20% pathway is only going to be working at 10% speed. So the rate limiting factor wouldn't be his genetics, the rate limiting factor would be his manganese status. So in his case, because we're working with such a small window, it's really important that we make sure that that 20% is able to function all of the time. We need to make sure he's at manganese saturation all of the time, so that he's able to use that 20% to the best of its ability. So making sure that we address this potential deficiency, and we don't know if there is a deficiency, but we do know that it is very likely that he is going to be struggling with, based on his symptoms, this pathway functioning, and we want to make sure that he is at least provided with sort of a minimal amount of manganese that a normal person would need to function, to make sure that that 20% is functioning at 20%, not 10%. So this is where your epigenetics override your genetics. So even though he has a genetic predisposition for this pathway to struggle, we can still do everything we can to support it to function at its maximum level of potential. And in the future, we just have to be mindful that he does have a weakness here. He is going to be more susceptible to mitochondrial toxins than a normal person. So providing a buffer of mitochondrial support will probably be helpful. So an extra level of antioxidant status. This means that when his glutathione tanks, he's going to feel it a lot harder than another person would. So making sure we bring his antioxidant status back up in his body, and especially in his mitochondria, is going to make him feel a lot better. So this was in the detoxification panel. This was just one of the things. I'm not even going to touch the methylation panel today because there was a lot of stuff happening in there, and making sure that you address all of the different genetic weaknesses is very important, so that we maintain a highest level of function in the reduced level of function that we have. Like, say you've got MTHFR C677T, essentially your methylation speed in your body is going to be reduced by 1/3, and if you're homozygous, it's going to be reduced by 2/3. You're going to be functioning at 30%. And this doesn't mean you can't be completely abundantly healthy. It just means you need to provide the support that your body needs to mitigate this inhibited function, and modify your lifestyle in such a way that this gene doesn't have to express as being a problem. So you can absolutely do lifestyle factors and change things in your environment, change your nutritional status to make it so that your genetics aren't the end of the world. But knowing where you're going to have a weakness, knowing where you're going to struggle, can be really helpful, because then you can understand what is going to be a useful, what approach, what lifestyle things you can change based on your weaknesses to actually make you feel better. This can really help you hone in on your supplements. It can really help you hone in on your diet. It can really help you understand why some of the things that you're doing are working and why some of them aren't. And it's a one-off test. It sticks for life. I think every single person should have this information in their hands. Not only is it helpful to provide it to any practitioner that you're going to work with, it's also really good for you to have an understanding of your genetics and how your body works, and where your genetic weaknesses are, and what you can do epigenetically to support your genetic weaknesses. Because it's only a weakness if it's allowed to express. If you never allow it the opportunity to express, you're always providing a level of epigenetic support, you never have it express, and it's never a weakness. So you can completely mitigate all of your genetic weaknesses by changing your epigenetic environment using supplements, diet, lifestyle factors. So I really would encourage you to do this test. Remember, it's like £80, $80, something like that. You take your code, upload it to a website called Genetic Genie. I would suggest you do the detoxification panel and the methylation panel. And if you need any help with that, you can just reach out and let me know. It's not my area of expertise by any means, but it is very fun. It is a lot of fun to do. I do get it. I've done it myself. I help my clients with it. And it can be a little bit complicated, and I'll tell you as well, it's very much trial and error. There is ways that you can use different types of functional testing, so you can test blood levels of like methylation factors and things like that. But I've found, like through my own experience and with my clients, it really is a trial and error thing. But it is better to do trial and error when you actually have some idea of what is likely to be happening, and it can really help you calculate what things you're trialing and erroring and correcting and getting right. And when you do get it right, it can really change your life. Getting my methylation right it literally helped with brain fog, with fatigue, with detoxification, with gut health. It helps so much stuff. So make sure that you address your genetic weaknesses, especially if you're currently in a state of ill health, because this is when these things are expressing the most. So this is good information to know if you're healthy, but it's crucial information to know if you're currently sick, if you have a chronic health condition, digestive. I would say this is very important for digestive diseases, any kind of mitochondrial problems, so brain fog and fatigue, hormonal imbalances. This is vital information. It's really important that you know this, because it can really help. And like I said, it's a one-off fee. You buy it, you've got it, run it through the stuff. Anytime you work with a new practitioner, you can bring it to them. It's always very helpful. I really like it when people come to me and they've done this testing, so I would encourage you to do it as well. Very helpful, one-off, very cheap, really can change your life. Definitely. There's no reason not to do it, so just do it, okay? So that's everything from me today. Hope you found this helpful and interesting. If you need any help with anything like this, please reach out and let me know. If you want me to connect you with the website, Genetic Genie, or like a place where you can do this, so maybe you don't have 23&me where you are. I'm sure you probably do, but if you don't, I can help you find somewhere that will sequence your genome for you. So if you have any questions, please let me know. If you need any help, please reach out, send me a message. That's everything from me today. See you soon. Have a lovely day. Ciao.